Welcome to the SRV Sky is Crying Blueprint. Yes, I know he did not write this song, but I'm focused on his cover because this right here, this that lick may have launched me right into my years of listening and trying to sound like SRV way back in 1995. You'll hear about that story in the next video. First things first, if you're watching this on YouTube, I can't guarantee you're going to see the whole thing or that you're going to hear the whole thing. I'm going to be using a lot of real songs in this video, and whether it stays up or not is out of my control. So I will have a link in the description to where these videos are posted on the site. That way you can get the whole thing uninterrupted. Second thing, I don't want to assume that you know who I am. Because even though I've been doing this a long time, I'm still finding people every day that don't realize what Texas Blues Alley is or that it even exists. So my name is Anthony Stauffer. I started a hobby way back in 2007 teaching Stevie Ray Vaughan licks on the internet, and that turned into what is now a 17-year career authoring courses, making hundreds of free lessons. And so I've been doing this for almost 2 decades at this point, even though I've expanded, teaching B.B. King, Freddie King, Clapton, Jimi Hendrix, Johnny Winter. Stevie Ray Vaughan was my core influence when I started, and he still is my primary influence, and I'm still learning about his style today. And that is what this series is focused about, because his cover of The Sky is Crying is, in my opinion, one of his most memorable recordings in his career, and possibly one of the best straight blues recordings of all time. Now we're going to talk about why I consider this recording so memorable in the next video, but we're going to build to that. We're going to look at history, because he didn't write this song. It was around for a long time. There were some fairly well-known recordings ahead of him that could have influenced him, and that's kind of what we're trying to do here. We're trying to see, how did Stevie Ray Vaughan arrive at that style of playing and that sound when he recorded The Sky is Crying? Now, there are bootlegs out there where he played this song as early as 1979, 1980. And they had some resemblance. Even his most recent recording, close to that date, which was in 1984, there were some resemblances. But that recording in 85 stands alone in some regards in terms of its simplicity. So again, we'll talk more about that specific recording in the next video. But today, we're going back in history. So if you look at my playlist here, I have a playlist of recordings of The Sky is Crying from Elmore James, Hound Dog Taylor, Albert King, Johnny Walker, and Earl Hooker, Fenton Robinson, Freddie King, George Thorogood, and then finally Stevie Ray Vaughan. Now there are a few recordings that I'm not including. There's a recording of Mike Bloomfield from a live performance in 1976, but I don't think that was ever put out as an album during Stevie Ray Vaughan's life. I am including the Hound Dog Taylor live recording because that was the next actual recording of any type of this song that I could actually find. I'm also not including Eric Clapton's recording of this song from, I think, maybe 74, because quite honestly, it's one of the weirdest interpretations of a blues song I've ever heard, and I really don't like it. So I'm not including that. But the rest I have here. We're going to start with Elmore James. So this was recorded. First of all, let's listen to the intro here. Obviously, slide guitar. Amazing reverb. This was recorded somewhere between 1960 and 61, either in Chicago or New York during what they call the fire sessions for the record label. What stands out right away is his vocal delivery. This is one of the things that sets him apart as a blues performer. Look at the tears roll down the street. So his little vocal trail offs and stuff like that, these are things that made their way into Stevie's recording. The sky's crying. Just one of the greatest blues singers of all time, in my opinion. So the guitar playing is kind of simple, but it typically was for him. Kind of a big band arrangement with horns and a piano. And you'll notice the song length is less than 3 minutes long. There's no guitar solo.
I saw my baby one morning, and she was walking on down.
Now, one of the things you'll notice, I'm going to pause it here because, you know, he has his lyrics that he sang on this, but over the years, different artists would fool around with the lyrics and change a line here or there, change a word there. So let's fast forward to the ending and you'll hear more of what I mean.
My baby don't love me no more.
That whole kind of a Muddy Water style thing.
Now the sky's been crying.
Listen to this.
The tears rolling out my door.
Okay. He just says, the tears rolling down my nose. Whereas when Stevie covered Liver, can you see the tears roll down my nose? So people took liberties with how they sang the lyrics. But his initial recording of this song kind of sets the tone. So let's go on to the next available recording, which is Hound Dog Taylor, Otis Payne, and Dillard Croom and Little Walter from the American Folk Blues Festival in 1967. So these folk festivals were where some of these blues artists that were active in the 40s and the 50s kind of fell off the radar. The whole British blues explosion helped bring some attention back to their careers, and some of them started essentially performing again at these folk festivals. That's Hound Dog Taylor singing. Now, let me rewind here. Listen to how he sings this. Very reminiscent of how Elmore James sang it. Again, the slide playing, very similar. This time we got harmonica in there. Trying to listen for some piano. I hear the bass and maybe some rhythm guitar. There's Little Walter on the harmonica. I think there's some changes in the lyrics here.
My baby this morning.
Yeah, right here.
And she was walking on down the street.
Did he say I saw my baby or just my baby? Let's listen for the next line.
My baby this morning, boy.
Just said my baby this morning. So I think there's a little change in the lyrics there. Let's listen to the ending of this one.
Don't tell me nothing.
Don't tell me nothing.
I know there's something going on.
Okay, so he just completely abandoned the third verse of lyrics. I know there's something going wrong. So, I mean, this was just kind of the way things went. Similar kind of ending again. So again, this would have been about 6 years after Elmore James recorded his. That takes us up to 1969, and Albert King, he recorded this song for his album Years Gone By. So let's listen to that intro again. So you hear that little beat at the beginning?
The sky is crying.
Just remember that for when we get to the 1984 version of the song.
Look at the tears roll down the street.
All right, right away we can tell the guitar is a direct inspiration on Stevie Ray Vaughan. Obviously, Stevie copied a lot of Albert King's style, especially on this song. It's the first version of this song that didn't feature slide. It features regular guitar playing, but also he's playing licks in between the vocal lines, similar to what Stevie did. So we're getting closer from what Elmore James did to Stevie.
The sky is crying.
Some of the vocal melodies I think's translated as well.
Look at the tears roll down the street.
Now, one thing about Albert's playing, obviously, Albert was not a tremendously versatile player. He had a set of licks that he played, and he played them in every song. It's part of what makes his style so recognizable. So the fact that he's playing this way in this song has less to do with the fact that it's this song and the fact that it is a slow blues song, because a lot of these licks he would repeat in just about every slow blues song that he played.
I've been looking for my baby, and I wonder what can she
Notice the tempo, it has a good clip. This is,
I saw my baby early one
we're
morning,
almost out of what I would consider slow blues territory at this point.
and she was walking on down the street.
More like a slow shuffle. Okay, this is also the first one, I think, to feature a real guitar solo. Classic Albert King soloing. I like that piano. You don't hear that a whole lot anymore, I don't think. You're hammering away. Got guitar pan to one side, piano to the other. Now, another interesting thing about this arrangement, he sings his third verse.
I got a bad feeling.
Got a bad feeling. So watch what happens when he gets to the end of the verse.
You know the sky is crying, yeah.
That's typically where you pause to the ending.
Rolling down my nose.
I don't know what happened. I don't know if he intended to go another verse, but you're going to hear that he comes back around and just starts the first verse over again.
The sky is crying.
And the producers are like, all right, that's it. And they fade out. All right, so in, let's see, 69, from 60 to 61. So in 9 years, we go from slide guitar all the way to Albert King playing what eventually kind of became the way that people play this song. Now we're going to go to, also in 1969, Earl Hooker, accompanied by Johnny Walker on piano. This one, we're back to slide guitar. So, a little reminiscent of Elmore James.
I said the sky is crying.
Kind of a laid-back vocal feel.
Look at the tears roll down the street.
Kind of some Muddy Water style slide guitar there.
I said the sky is
Now listen to the other side.
crying.
It sounds like there's like a,
Tears roll down the street.
hear that? Kind of like one of those voice box things, like Peter Frampton used.
Well, I'm looking for my baby, and I wonder.
Or is that a horn with a wah-wah? Is that a horn or is that a guitar? Is that a slide guitar with a wah-wah pedal? Or is it a talk box? I don't know. If you can figure out what it is, I would love to know. All in all, this is kind of a strange-ish recording.
Baby, one morning.
The third verse here. So we do have a solo, which just has slide guitar and then this weird sound, whatever that is. Oh, and then the that is strange.
And she was walking.
All right, so in the third verse, he just kind of repeats an earlier verse, and I don't think he ever gets to the actual third verse. I got a bad feeling. So all in all, kind of a unique interpretation of the song. I think it's a little unfocused, but it was in there, 1969, so I wanted to put it in there. Let's move on now to 1970, Fenton Robinson, and I believe that this appeared on an album at some point, but I think it was put out as a single in 1970. All right.
The sky is crying.
All right, so this is even a little faster than Albert King's take on the song. The vocals are a little bit more laid back. Slide guitar up there. Harmonica. Yeah, the vocals are really laid back.
Look at the tears roll down the street.
Great singer.
You know I'm trying to find my baby.
Some kind of newish melodies on the vocal lines. Again, it's the piano. Ooh, did you hear that? Listen to this right at the end. So this version obviously doesn't sound a whole lot like what ended up being recorded by Stevie Ray, but in terms of novel takes on a blues standard, I kind of like this. Very deliberate. I gotta find out who was playing piano on this.
You know, it made me feel so good.
So keep in mind, this is 1970. So Elmore James, it's funny, I think of him as kind of like a real old-timey blues guy, but he was only 40-something in 1960, but so he was a young guy. He passed away way too early, but 1960 and 1970 culturally, I was born in 76, so take all this with a grain of salt. When you hear them kind of pushing the pace and kind of reinventing a blues standard, just keep in mind that the music scene was changing, public attitudes about blues music was changing. The blues was, I think, in a very different spot in 1970, so just keep that in mind when you hear people kind of reinventing these classic tunes. So that takes us to 1973 or 72. Freddie King recording for his album Texas Cannonball. So this is kind of the most out there cover of the song so far. Not really out of line with the kind of stuff Freddie was recording at the time. For me personally,
The sky is crying.
it's kind of disappointing because if there's one other person besides Stevie or Albert King that I would have liked to hear take on this song, it would have been Freddie King.
Look at the tears roll down.
Now he did kind of have his own take on the vocals here.
I'm sitting here thinking about my baby.
So it's just a completely different song.
Can't you be?
The reason I say I'm disappointed is that I'm such a fan of Freddie King's slow blues playing. And maybe it was one of those things where The Sky is Crying was kind of Albert's thing in terms of the three kings of the blues. And so Freddie kind of made his name with songs like Have You Ever Loved a Woman? And so maybe if he was going to do a cover of The Sky is Crying, he didn't want to do it in a slow blues way that resembled Albert King. I have no idea. I'm just speculating here. All in all, if I didn't know the history of the song and if I hadn't ever heard Stevie Ray or Albert King's covers of the song, I would probably like this a lot more. It's just a little too laid back for me. Let's listen to a little bit of the guitar solo. Yeah, it's not my cup of tea, but it's in there. It was in the pool of things that Stevie could have listened to. All right, so the next step on our journey is 1978, when George Thorogood recorded a cover of this song. Again, back to slide guitar. bit of an extended intro here.
The sky is crying. Look at the tears roll down the street.
So some of these are kind of reminiscent of the way Elmore James played slide in between the vocal lines.
The sky is crying. Look at the tears roll down
The vocal delivery is a little flatter, both in terms of
feeling sad and lonely.
it's hard to kind of keep up with a guy like Elmore James. There's parts of it that sound a little bit maybe like what Elmore James did, but overall a little bit more subdued. Let's listen to the solo here. So he's kind of doing his own thing here during the solo.
The birds sing a little tune.
Wait.
The weeping willow.
Oh, is this that one?
Understanding in a little.
Okay. So I forgot. What happens in this cover by George Thorogood and the Destroyers is that he mixes two Elmore James songs together, The Sky is Crying and Bleeding Heart. Now, Bleeding Heart, or My Bleeding Heart, was made a little bit... I first encountered it through Jimi Hendrix. It was one of the slow blues tunes that he recorded. It wasn't as well known as Red House, but I loved what he did with the song Bleeding Heart. So it turns out that was also written by Elmore James. And what George Thorogood is doing here is he's mixing the two songs together. And as was the case with more than a few of those older blues guys, is that the songs kind of, the lyrics changed, but what was played in them kind of ran together. Let's fast forward to the ending here. So he's back to The Sky is Crying at the end here. So we've gone from 1972 or 1960 with Elmore James all the way up to 1978 with George Thorogood. Now, I could not find any covers of this song from then until Stevie recorded his first take at it in 1984. Now, like I said before, I have bootlegs of him playing this song as early as 1980, and in those live recordings, as you'll hear in this 1984 take, it kind of blended a little bit more with Texas Flood. They weren't as distinct as they ended up being. So let's go to the 84 recording here.
1, 2.
Okay, so you hear this?
1, 2.
Remember when I told you in the Albert King version, the thing that he plays at the beginning to sync them all up? This is what I was talking about.
2. The sky is crying.
Okay, one of the things you'll notice, this was recorded, most likely, I think, during the 1984 sessions for Couldn't Stand the Weather, which was, I believe, in January 1984 at the Power Station Studio in New York. The tone on here is a little bit darker, and it is a little bit similar to what you might hear on The Things That I Used to Do in the parts where he does not have the Leslie engaged.
Can you see the tears roll down the street?
The vocal delivery is similar, but a little different to what came later.
Sky is crying.
And you notice what's not in here,
Can you see the tears
there's no organ, because in 1984, Reese Winans hadn't joined the band yet. It was just a trio at this point. And it's amazing, if you're used to the version that we all know that had the organ in there, how bare it feels without it.
I've been looking for my baby, yeah. And I wonder
Now,
where can she be?
one of the things about this version that you notice when we get to the solo, two things. There's an obvious overdub that you can hear right. Listen to how the tone changes right on that final chord. Right here. Play it one more time. The tone, in some ways, loses some low end. It cleans up. And then he goes into the solo. So, in terms of why wasn't this version chosen over the one recorded in 85? I'm sure there were many factors, but I think one of them may have been that it wasn't a clean take. There was an obvious overdub. Either he overdubbed what he played in the verses and kept the original solo, or he overdubbed a solo and the tone was different enough that it's very noticeable. Already, his soloing is busier here, like right there. That is busier than anything he played in the 85 version, in terms of how much he played in a space. And I'll talk about why that's significant more in the next video, but I just want to draw your attention to, when you're listening to these two different versions of Stevie recording this song, it's not just they record at different times and he plays more. This is a different take on the song than what he did in 85, just in terms of how he approaches playing. This is Texas Flood live performance territory. And what I said before is that in his early recordings of the song live, it did have a lot of similarities to how he played in Texas Flood. And so if you're an artist who plays an already somewhat limited style of music like blues, and you have two slow blues songs that are both kind of inspired by Albert King, it's kind of hard to have two memorable songs that both sound similar to another artist and sound similar to each other. This right here, my prediction is, if this had been chosen for the album instead of the 85 version, it would not have been nearly as memorable as the one that was chosen, because it's a perfectly good take on the song, but knowing what it became, looking in retrospect, it sounds like he's playing too much to my ears. Like that little thing there, that's a live Texas Flood thing right there. Now, in fairness, none of his studio recording of Texas Flood didn't have this much playing in. So there is that. All right, let's get to the end here. Oh, one other thing I want to point out. Let's see here. Bleed through on the mics at 53 seconds. Let's go back here. Listen to this. Listen here. You might have to turn it off right before he hits that. Listen right before he plays that. Right here. In the background, you hear. So that's what leads me to believe that what we're hearing now was the overdub, not what he played in the solo. Because the way this would have worked is that when he was in the studio, he was 84. I'm sure he had at least a couple of amps mic'd up. By the time they got to 85, it was a little more ridiculous. But he had more at his disposal in 84 than he did when he recorded Texas Flood, which was just his, from what I understand, his Vibroverb or his Super Reverb and the Dumble in Jackson Brown's studio. The only two amps that he used. So he would have had more amps here, and it would have been loud because it was always loud. And even though they were in a studio where things are supposed to be isolated, there was obviously some guitar bleeding into one of the other mics. This could have been the drum overheads, if you listen to this. Right here. Given how it sounds, it sounds like it's far off in the distance. So if they were separated, whether it was the drum overheads or It could have even been if he were tracking vocals later and listening to the guitar in his headphones while he sang. If the headphones were loud enough, it could have leaked that way. I think the reason that this slipped by is that it probably wasn't fixable. And the reason you don't hear it other places is because his playing filled up enough of the spaces around the vocals that there was no chance for that little bit of bleed through to come to leak in. It's just right here. He takes so long to get to that lick that whatever track that bleed was on, just, you couldn't hide it. Because when it, sorry to keep talking about this, but when it happens on a track like a drum overhead or something like that, you can't just silence that track, because sometimes it's just the sound of the air around the cymbals. If you pull that down enough to hide the bleed from the guitar for even that little bit, it creates a noticeable dip in the sound that is hard to account for. And keep in mind, this is 1984. Nobody's doing this on computer. They weren't plugins. This is all analog gear recording to tape here. So, all right. So that's... Let's listen to the ending real quick. So even the ending, he's going on and on and on a little bit longer. So all in all, if you always thought he played too little in the version we all know, then maybe you appreciate this one more. My point is that the version that we all know from the Sky is Crying album was special. And that intro, the squealing tone, this one, I believe, was most likely recorded during the sessions for the Soul to Soul album. This was at Dallas Sound Lab Studio between March and May 1985. Now, the reason I think it was from the same sessions is because if you listen to his tone, the tone that he has on The Sky is Crying only shows up in a couple of places. And one of them, where it's similar, is this take on the song Empty Arms, recorded for Soul to Soul. The same kind of whistling, slightly out of phase kind of tone that he has. And the way that it worked by the time he got to the Soul to Soul sessions is that he had a lot of different amps mic'd up. And my understanding is he would come back into the control room and would just slide faders up and down until he found a combination that he liked. And so if you listen to the tones across the Soul to Soul album, it kind of supports the idea that he was just there picking different combinations that he liked. Some were cleaner, some were more dirty, but the Empty Arms tone, in my opinion, is the most similar to what he did in The Sky is Crying. And so that's what kind of leads me to believe that it was The Sky is Crying that we all know was recorded during those same sessions. So anyway, that's my little history deep dive into The Sky is Crying, tracing it all the way back to Elmore James. My purpose for doing this was, number one, I don't think anybody should go around thinking that this is a Stevie original song. It was a cover. Stevie would have wanted you to know it was a cover. And I just kind of wanted to explore what he could have listened to before he got to his time to play it live and to record it. What I hear from him, obviously heavily inspired by Albert King's playing, but as some people have noted, his vocals were a little bit more reminiscent of Elmore James's than Albert King's vocal approach. And then we had some kind of weird ones in there that were just kind of doing their own thing. But anyway, in the next video, we are going to talk about why I think that 1985 recording is so memorable. It changed my life and played a pretty big part in my guitar journey. But more about that next time. I welcome your comments and thoughts wherever you're watching this video. And until next time, thanks for watching.